Yes, this is something entirely different for me, but there's a good reason for that. I'm actually a political scientist by training, but don't hold that against me. As I was just saying, I find politics increasingly depressing, so I've decided... Yes, exactly. The reason I wrote this book is largely because of this man. This is Postmaster Herschel Clifford Bald. I used to work for Telecom once upon a time. I haven't always been an academic either. So many years ago I worked for Telecom before it became Telstra, around the time it became Telstra. I wasn't very good at it, and they knew that, and I knew that. And I had decided to leave. So my boss at the time, I worked in Adelaide. My boss at the time sent me down. There used to be a telegraph museum in King William Street in Adelaide. And he was returning to Darwin to give a speech on the 50th anniversary of the bombing of Darwin. It wasn't people ask you how long does it take to write a book. It depends on what you use as the starting point. So it's either a quarter of a century or a few years. So they sent me down to the Telegraph Museum in King William Street to photocopy some papers that they held there. And I was looking through them, and I came across this name. And the reason it caught my eye is because, as you see there, he was born in Hallett, this is South Australia. He came from the mid-north of South Australia, but he grew up in a place called Kadina, which was my hometown, a fairly small place on the top of the Yorke Peninsula, that leg bit at the bottom of South Australia. And he served in the First World War. He joined the Postmasters General Department back then. He did 2 stints in Darwin. So, as we'll see in a moment, he has a prominent place in Australian history for a number of reasons. And his first job was at a place called Charles Moore & Co., which was a department store. I'm not sure if anyone's ever heard of it. It doesn't exist anymore. But when I was a little boy, and we still used to... that's where we spent our pocket money, when we still celebrated Guy Fawkes Night. So I remember going into the Moores building. It's quite a while ago. But that's where our hard-earned pocket money went on fireworks. So the fact that he came from my hometown, went to the same schools as me, it kind of caught my eye. So I took a copy of the papers for the boss, and I kept the copy for myself, and I carried them around with me for an awful long time, until I finally got around to doing all the rest of the research that goes into telling this story. So all these places on this map here are all different places around South Australia where the post office, when Darwin was bombed in February 1942, 10 people were killed at the post office, and these are all the places they either hailed from or worked from around South Australia. So, a fairly extensive footprint. This was Herschel Bald on his first term as postmaster in Darwin, where when the first airmail came from the United Kingdom to Australia, he was the man who Charles Kingsford Smith handed over the first mailbag to. He also has a wonderful name, Herschel Clifford Bald. It has sounds like he should be in an Agatha Christie thriller or something like that. So this is Darwin today. This here large building is the Northern Territory Parliament, but it is the site of the old post office and various telegraph buildings. This is an aerial view from the other way. This is Mitchell Street along here, and these buildings here are where the post office, the residence, and all the various telegraph buildings were. And this one here is Government House, the Administrator's Office. It still exists, still a beautiful old building. So these are the cliffs along here where people literally ran out of and dived over to take cover when the first air raid started. So in telling this story, I decided to do a bit of history and explain why Darwin was so significant. That's largely because of these 3 men, Charles Todd, John McDouall Stuart and George Goyder. Todd was the man who proposed building the overland telegraph, connecting the colonies with the rest of the world. John McDouall Stuart was the man who proved it was possible to go from south to the north and back again. There was a bit of competition going on amongst the colonies. The famous Burke and Wills expedition, which never quite made it. But McDouall Stuart made it from the south to the north and returned again. George Goyder, the Surveyor General of South Australia, after the first failed attempt by Finnis, he was kitted out, went up in an incredibly short space of time and reasonably cheaply compared to the first failed attempt, surveyed what became Darwin. And then Charles Todd was the man who played a very hands-on role in building the overland telegraph. They did it in 3 sections, starting from the south, the north, working down in the middle section. Todd took charge of the south, and that was the first section finished, and then from the north, coming backwards. This is going to be a largely visual exercise. This is the first telegraph camp at Port Darwin around 1870, and this is planting of the first telegraph pole near Palmerston, named after Lord Palmerston, later in September 1870. And around the same time, or the following year, this is the where the undersea cable meets up with the mainland. So this is why Darwin was so important. It was the point where the overland telegraph was to meet the undersea cable. And there's again this is just on the northwest corner of the Northern Territory Parliament. So this is the original stone from 1872 that the first permanent cable set. These are all the most significant buildings in the North Darwin at the time. Around the corner then was the police station, courthouse, etc. So this is the Northern Territory Parliament. Also in here is the Northern Territory Library. And there's a large hall here on the inside. And on the floor of the hall is this plaque, which reads, on the 19th of February 1942, an enemy bomb fell here and killed 10 people. So it's thought to be pretty much the precise location where the postmaster's residence was, where the bomb landed, killing the postmaster and colleagues and family. So this is the post office at the time, looking from the Mitchell Street entrance, so back from the Esplanade. It was a fairly busy post office. And this is the postmaster's residence right next door, where they built the slit trench in the backyard. No excuse for being late to work, he didn't have far to travel. This photo was actually taken the following year. But in 1958, on the 19th of February, Thursday morning, 188 Japanese fighters, bombers, dive bombers launched the first of what was at least 64, possibly more, air raids on Darwin and surrounds, and 99 on the Australian mainland. The first was by far and away the most deadly. There are oil tanks around the Darwin Harbour, have been there storage oil tanks for some time. They were targeted, various ships in the harbour. That's the Neptuna on that side. Darwin did have some defences, but limited defences. This chap here is a fellow by the name of Jack Mulholland, who died just a few years ago, but he wrote a book about his time in Darwin and talked about the post office. He stood guard. But actually, I was in Darwin last year giving a talk, and this woman told me that this actually was a stage photograph. And I had the good fortune of exchanging some correspondence with Jack just before he died a few years ago. He still took a great interest in Darwin and didn't think the story had been told sufficiently, or enough people were aware of it. He explains in the book how they opted for the cheap option, basically some recycled anti-aircraft guns and so forth from ships to defend Darwin. As also explained in the book, this has been an issue for some time, that the awareness that Darwin would be the first line of defence should the Japanese decide to attack Australia. So a number of Japanese planes were shot down. Just recently, I believe that there is a statue of this has just been revealed on Melville Island just in recent times. This famous photo. As I mentioned, the first air raid was by far and away the most devastating. At least 243 people killed. This remains the official figure from the Low Commission, or the Low Royal Commission, which literally happened, was instigated within weeks. Some people estimate that it was, possibly a four-figure number. Other historians or people who've done a lot of work on it suggest that's probably a bit too high, but maybe 350 to 400 is a more realistic figure. But that remains the official number. 400 to 500 injured. There were 57 ships in the harbour, of which 8 were sunk, 3 ran aground, 25 were damaged. On the Perry alone, there were 88, and now I think it's been revised to 89 lives lost. If you go up on the Esplanade in Darwin and the Memorial Walk, there is a cannon which points out to where the Perry went down. The post office, the telegraph office, the cable offices, the postmaster's residence were all bomb damaged. The police station and barracks, which were just around the corner. The government offices and the administrator's residence. The hospital. The second air raid came a couple of hours later. The RAF station, the civil aerodrome were all bombed. Many of the Australian and American aircraft never got off the ground. The Japanese fleet, pretty much the same one which attacked Pearl Harbor, came down between Bathurst and Melville Islands and around from the south. So it was initially thought that it was American planes returning back because of bad weather. So they were taken by surprise. This is Prime Minister Curtin's declaration after the bombing. Darwin had largely been evacuated of all but essential personnel in December, particularly following the fall of Singapore. But it was also kept quiet the extent of the damage and the number of lives lost. The numbers he revealed were far less, and it wasn't until war's end that the real damage and the lives lost was revealed. So this is a photo before of the postmaster's residence and the post office. This comes from the National Archives. But also, so this is the before, and then this is from the Northern Territory Library collection, almost from the same spot. As you can see, an incredible amount of damage. The kind of smaller, lightweight buildings in the front have pretty much disappeared. This isn't the actual trench, but this is the kind of trench that they dug in the back out of the postmaster's residence. This is from the Larrakia barracks, but it's much similar. There's a description of it in the book. One of his colleagues wrote a letter to his wife the night before the air raid and the night before he was killed, describing the trench and how he'd been helping the postmaster build the trench. This is the rear of the postmaster's residence. As the letter described, he said that we'd like to think that it would survive anything but a direct hit, and a direct hit it was indeed. This is the yard, the telephone exchange. They're all in the same building. There's quite a large truck here on its turned on its lid, cable drums and so forth all turned over. So this is Hurdle Bald, his wife and daughter. They were also killed at the same time. He'd been urged by the administrator of the Northern Territory, a man by the name of Aubrey Abbott, to send all the women home. But his wife stayed on. She took up duties as a telephonist, and his daughter, she had worked for the PMG, but she resigned when her father returned to Darwin, went up there as well, got a job as a typist at the tax office. She had planned on taking cover there, but just by chance happened to be at the post office at the time and took shelter with her parents, so they all died alongside each other. At the same time, there was a son, Peter Bald, who was 15 years old at the time and living with an auntie and uncle. And he attempted to make it to Darwin for Christmas in the lead up to in late 1941. But every time he was booked on a flight, he was removed from the flight because it was taken over by military, and soon thereafter Darwin was closed, so he never made it. So this is a photo of a few years ago of him in Darwin, standing alongside that photograph of his sister. He also went on to work for the PMG Telecom, just like Hurdle Bald's father and grandfather had before him. It came to my attention that, at the time Hurdle Bald was killed, that his father still lived in the street in which I grew up, in which my parents still live. So that's why, one of the reasons that it caught my eye. This is a man named Arthur Wellesley Wellington, who worked with Hurdle Bald when he was postmaster at Port Lincoln, and requested him to come to Darwin and work with him. He said, sure, as long as you have a home for me and his new wife. He agreed. They said, well, will you come first? She can follow. He said, no, we'll come up at the same time. So there's an extract from a letter that he wrote to his wife and baby daughter on the eve of the first air raid, just describing things in the situation. And I was giving a talk at the State Library of South Australia last year, and there's a woman in the audience came up to me afterwards and said she was the baby girl who he was writing to. It's amazing, that's one of the things you don't get when you're writing about macro history, is people with personal stories. And the same in the Northern Territory. There was a woman who came up to tell me that her mother was a telephonist for the PMG, was pregnant with her when she was evacuated, and she later returned to the Territory. And likewise, a lady who was a teacher at history teacher at the Darwin High School, saying how Jack Mulholland had come up with this bit of ordnance to donate to the school. It's 75th anniversary was just this year, and there are fewer and fewer people who actually have personal connections to it. Emily Young was one of the telephonists, one of the few people who hadn't come from South Australia. The Northern Territory being administered by South Australia at the time, but she was one of the few who hadn't come from South Australia. Jenny Stasnowski, who had Broken Hill, still living as part of New South Wales, was governed from South Australia. Morgan is just on the Murray River, just a couple of hours outside of Adelaide. Archie Halls, known as Bro Halls, telegraph supervisor. These two sisters, Eileen Carrick-Mullen and Jean Carrick-Mullen. The older sister was sent to Darwin to train in the use of the new trunk exchange system. Her younger sister, who was also working as a casual telephonist at the PMG, she quit her job, paid her own way to Darwin, and also then soon after got work. They had not long returned from, I guess, the trip of a lifetime. Travelled around Europe, the UK, been to Scotland, France, and then literally returned to South Australia just on the eve of the war. They grew up in Port Augusta. Their father was a publican in Port Augusta, died at an early age, and then their mother kept running the pub before she became too much for her, and then they returned to Adelaide. It's quite a moving photograph. It looks like, those kind of sisters who are probably inseparable through life. And this man, Walter Rolling, who he actually didn't fit in he went into the slit trench, but it was overcrowded, so he took cover elsewhere, but died of his injuries just a couple of days later and was buried at sea. So this is the photo of the this is why there's some speculation about the number of people killed, because there are people talk of mass graves on Carlin Beach and people literally being loaded in using front-end loaders. These are marked graves, but some of them aren't. That was Earl Bulls. So they were first buried at Carlin Beach, so later reburied at the Berrima Cemetery, and ultimately at the Adelaide River War Cemetery, which is an official Commonwealth Grave Cemetery. There's also people, about the numbers. There is also a large Chinese community and an Aboriginal community. But some people who know much more about this than I do suggest that some territory historians suggest that the areas that were bombed were unlikely to have large populations of Chinese or Aboriginal people living or working in the area. So inside the Adelaide River War Cemetery, if you walk in the front gates, directly ahead of you is the military section. Then over to the left is a civilian section where all the PMG staff are buried side by side. So in addition to those killed, there are many injured, and some of their stories of how they made their way out of the territory are explained. But there are also many who stayed on behind. All these fellows here volunteered to stay behind. They took over a Heritos store, which became the new post office. There's also some. Obviously, not everybody knew there was a Plan B. There are people who described in the book. There are a number of people who were asked to explain their absences. They made their way south. Some of them did it and didn't know what was going on. We're just basically looking out for our well-being. And the PMG sent an investigator, well, 3. The following day, they flew out of Parafield Airport just north of Adelaide and arrived they were in Darwin within a couple of days to an investigation. They set up a new camp at 10 miles south of Darwin and 22 miles south, but also in Darwin. So within hours of the first air raid, some quick thinking people took a Morse code Morse sounder from the wreckage, tapped into the existing overland telegraph cables and tapped out a message that Darwin had been bombed. There's a quite famous Morse code message, which is reproduced in the book. This is one of them. This is her page. There's an appendix to the book listing everybody who was in Darwin at the time working for the PMG and what happened to them, what their job was, whether those who were injured, those who were safe. Which is, I also had, many people write to me saying that my father or uncle or grandfather, and this is one of them, hard at work. There were more than 60 air raids in the years that followed, so they were, working under fairly arduous conditions. They'd work early in the morning, late at night. Also amongst some plenty of ongoing threats, sitting aboard an unexploded 250-pound bomb. The investigations, many of the bombs, like the one that landed in the postmaster's residence, were probably a 500-pound bomb. This fellow is Henry Scott. He was a nephew of Herschel Bald. He came from Clare in South Australia, famous for Rieslings. He was a lineman, and he was working on top of a telegraph pole when the air raid happened. So he was literally looking down the street, watching witnessing the post office being bombed. And he kept a diary, so he detailed all these things. So he was, and also came under attack himself, him and his colleague. But he was also knowing that, looking down the street at the post office where his aunt and uncle and discovered that his cousin as well were killed. Somebody late at night after the first air raid sat down under a tree and wrote out pages and pages of everything that had happened through the day while it was still clear in his mind, which has subsequently been transcribed. When I started looking into it, it was sealed, but it has subsequently been opened. But pages and pages in great detail of everything that happened through the day. So despite what he witnessed, he stayed on in the territory. He worked in the Army Signals Unit for a while. He experienced 28 air raids firsthand. And he's also the person responsible for laying the telegraph cable along Mitchell Street, which was a bit funny, as he described it, the bombed-out exchange where portable telephone was connected to where the old switchboard stood. So he later recalled this happened about a fortnight after the first bombing raid on Darwin, around the first week of March 1942. As I was the linesman, it was my duty to test the line. It was as clear as a bell when I spoke to the chief in Adelaide. Mr. Henry then took over and spoke to the deputy director in Adelaide, making the historic occasion official. What a privilege it was that my voice was the very first to be speaking down the line to the chief in Adelaide that day. So his was the first voice to be carried over the overland telegraph. There's some conflicting stories about how the message actually got out. That Morse message that was tapped out, one that it was picked up in Alice Springs, relayed on to Adelaide, but also that it made its way to Melbourne, where the headquarters of the PNG was. The message was passed on to the Prime Minister, and then they were instructed to destroy the note and not give it a mention. Probably some version of both is true. They're not mutually exclusive. Some of the ships on fire in the harbour at the time, one of which was loaded with ordnance, so a bit later on in the day it exploded. They thought there was another air raid, and it was actually just one of the ships in the harbour that was literally going off. That's what was left of the police barracks. The wharf at the time was clearly a real mess, and various residents as well. The hospital was bombed, significant damage. Thanks.
You said that the PNG, within a day, had someone up there. That was quicker than the Army and the Air Force, wasn't it?
Yes, literally they had three people. They had considerable experience. I can't remember exactly how much, but in the book they had a plane, flew out of Parafield Airport. Three of them, they were there at the camp. The next day, literally taking account of everybody and getting organised. Yeah, it was incredibly fast. There's also, as I mentioned, some of the people who were asked to explain themselves, some made it all the way back to Adelaide, injured. They kind of fending for themselves.
Well, one made it to Melbourne, I think. One of the people.
That's right. They were also asked to, account for their actions and explain why. Given literally within days a typed letter saying, "Please explain yourself."
Right.
And I reproduced a couple of those. There were two people who wrote typed responses and one handwritten, where they were, kind of firmly tongue-in-cheek, saying, well, nobody bothered to tell us the plans, and, we were literally looking out for ourselves because you weren't. But, in their generosity, the Director General of the Postmaster General's Department, decided to just give people allow them a little grace and consider them to be at work for the few days of which they were unaccounted for. There's also, many people, had compensation claims denied because they weren't on duty at the time they were killed or injured. But yeah, it was a big organisation, Postmaster. It still is, and they were incredibly organised.
So how quickly did the news of the air raid get to the rest of the world?
Well, it happened reasonably quickly, but the extent of it and the detail was, it was not seen. It wasn't explained exactly how significant it was and how many people were killed. And of course, there's then speculation about whether the Japanese had any intent on landing and occupying. I think most people agree that it was literally just to keep people busy. All those ships that were in harbour went elsewhere. Darwin literally became a military town thereafter. American and Australian troops and planes. For those who've been to Darwin, there's still all these along the highway. There are still all these old airstrips, you know, that you can visit and are highly visible. You can do tours of, you know, the tunnels under all the oil tanks.
Did you look at the Royal Commission report? Because that really opened it up, didn't it? They didn't release that, but...
Yes, it was, you know, and it remains, 75 years later, it remains, you know, the first and last official word. But, you know, that was literally, the Low Commission was underway and completed, you know, before the end of the war. And versions of it were seen by people, but it wasn't until after the war that the full extent of it, and I guess, you know, some of the questioning the defence preparedness. But, you know, as I kind of explained in the start of the book, people have been talking about this and the possibility of attacks on Darwin, you know, for decades. The British and others, you know, there have been a number of attempts at various times by the British to settle across the north of Australia as an outpost. Most of them failed. They did fail, but you know, there was an awareness that it was vulnerable, and you know, it's still Australia's kind of connection to Asia. It's, you know, closer to much of, you know, Asian centres than the rest of the country.
I remember seeing there's been some good documentaries, but the soldiers weren't allowed to practice around the aircraft guns because they didn't want to scare the populace. So when the attack happened, that was the first time they tried to fire them. The Navy were issued rifles, but they didn't have any ammunition the next day to repel a Japanese invasion.
Yeah, that fellow in the photo kind of doing that, Jack Mulholland, you know, he goes into some detail as well about the level of preparedness or otherwise, and how well equipped they were or weren't. You know, there are pretty limited defences. It was kind of, you know, it was all done on the cheap pretty well. You know, took the cheapest possible option. Yeah, and Northern Territorians still take it incredibly. You know, on the 19th of February this year, there was it's a very big event. It's commemorated every year. It's not as well known throughout the rest of the, you know, Sydney had, you know, there was the mini subs and so forth up and down the east coast, and there was a small, in the Adelaide GPO there was a commemorative plaque on the wall, and there's also, you know, a bit of a, just at the back of the book, mentioning that some years ago, you know, whether they should even bother commemorating the event. You know, arguments, I guess, between Post Office and Telecom as to, well, who should actually take responsibility, and more importantly, who should foot the bill for if you were to hold some kind of memorial. That was on the 40th anniversary.
So is the idea that that bomb actually hit the trench?
Yes, pretty much. Yeah, and that small plaque on the floor, and also in there, you know, there was a bit of information about the people who were killed. There was mounted on the wall was a flag that was found not too far away, an Australian flag. But yes, it's, you know, pretty much thought to be the precise location within reason as to where it landed and where they were killed.
You're talking trench. Just how deep was it?
Off the top of my head, I think it was 10 feet or something like 10. It had corrugated iron, a couple of sleepers across the top. You know, small and crowded. Not very big at all.
That's what I would have anticipated. I was just curious as to how
And
deep and how
you know,
feasible.
Yeah, and as you know, one of those people, in response to the director of the PM, you know, asking what happened to you, they were, you know, saying, we haven't been given any kind of defences. If we want a tin hat, we have to source it for ourselves, and we don't get any time off to dig a trench. Kind of explaining that the trench they had to dig in their own spare time, not something they were.
That's what I wondered.
Thank you.